So good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to start. I will ask all speakers to please unmute and put on your cameras, please. Great. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the NCBA Economic Update. Today's economic update is themed Navigating COVID-19, Financial Survival in the Time of Corona. My name is Rosalind Gishuru. I'm the Group Director for Marketing, Communications and Citizenship at NCBA Bank, and I will be your host this morning. Thank you all for joining in on this call. It's a bit early, but thank you very much for taking the time. Many of you will remember that just 2 months ago, we held our 7th edition of the NCBA Economic Forum. We all sat under one roof, we shook hands and had a lively, engaging conversation about the economic outlook for 2020. At this time, nobody could have predicted the turn of events and that this pandemic has taken. So this morning, to help us navigate the theme, financial survival in the time of Corona, we are joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Starting with Honorable Betty Minor, the CS in the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. Karibu sana mheshimiwa. We're joined by Kwame Owino, the CEO at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Welcome, Kwame, once again. We are also joined by Washeke Duati, founder and CEO of Centonomy. A very warm welcome to you, Washeke. And from within the bank, we have Mr. John Gashora, our Group Managing Director. We have Mr. John Okulo, who is our Group Director for Corporate Banking. We are joined as well by Mr. Michael Washira, who is our Group Director in Global Markets. And last and certainly not least, we are very pleased to also have Raphael Agum, who's the Director and Chief Economist at NCBA Group. I just want to mention to everyone who's logged in today that our hashtag is NCBA 2020 Outlook. So feel free to use it. So at this juncture, allow me to invite our Group Managing Director who will give his remarks, and also allow our in-house Chief Economist, Raphael Agum, to amplify his conversation further. Our Group MD will then invite Honorable Betty Minor to then make her remarks. Welcome everyone, and John, over to you.
Thank you, Rosa, and good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me well.
Good morning.
Very good. I hope you're all keeping safe and social distancing as we should be doing. This global pandemic, as you all know, will change the way we do things. You'd all agree with me that a lot has changed since the last time we engaged with each other at the NCBA Economic Forum, which was just 2 months ago. It looks like such a long time ago now. While it would have been our wish that these subsequent engagements be under better circumstances, the reality today is not only different, but unprecedented. I think it's Dwight Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States, who once said, and I quote, "I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." Indeed, plans from as recent as just a few weeks back have been rendered unrecognizably useless. COVID-19 pandemic has ravaged the world. We are all struggling to deal with it effectively and with uncertain duration. As individuals, companies, businesses, the country and the whole world over, we have had to adjust day to day in how we interact and how we do business. The pandemic is disproportionately affecting countries not only as a health crisis, but one which has now become a social and an economic catastrophe. To contain the contagion, the governments have minimized movement with curfews such as here in Kenya and full lockdowns in many affected countries in Europe and even here in Africa, like South Africa. It is no longer business as usual. Our lives, to a degree, have changed unimaginably just from 2 weeks ago. Look at us today. We are logging into this forum, perhaps a historic moment where we're doing this through Zoom to effectively ensure that there's social distancing, even as we continue to have these conferences. We have seen the number of infected globally increase to over, I believe, 1 million as of today, and over close to 50,000 deaths so far. In Kenya, the numbers have been on the rise. Just yesterday, it was announced we have had 3 deaths in Kenya, as you're aware, and we have crossed over the 3-digit number of cases. While developed markets have been most affected, emerging and frontier economies such as ours are beginning to contend with increasing new infections and secondary effects of economic fallout from advanced economies, given the current reality of economic integration and supply chain infrastructure. Like the rest of the world, COVID-19 has drastically reshaped Kenya's economic outlook. We have had restrictions on our own lives. Domestic demand, which was already fragile, will wane, even as supply shocks impair productivity across many sectors. This could degrade economic growth to just about 2.3% in our estimation, should the crisis persist through the second quarter of this year. Protecting health of the public continues to take precedence at this point, and the contingency measures that have been taken to contain the virus will certainly add economic vulnerabilities. Companies' effective capacity is falling fast, and export markets are quickly shrinking. Tougher guidelines on freights, border tensions, or border closures with Uganda and some of our other neighbors, I'm sure it's going to happen, and potentially other regional partners is expected to decline the domestic and regional demand for some goods, and that will continue to hamper trade. Demand for non-essential goods has dried up, hurling the retail and wholesale sector into economic vulnerability. The NSE, the Nairobi Securities Exchange, is not exempted from these vulnerabilities. Valuations have fallen sharply with over 20% decline in stock prices. At the same time, global risk aversion and the potential impact of the crisis on export earnings and remittances could further weaken the currency, which is already reeling from the global risk aversion that has seen the significant appreciation in the US dollar. Bond markets, though considered safe havens, are themselves reeling from the global thirst for liquidity and flexibility that these levels of uncertainty bring forth. I just saw a note yesterday saying that capital outflow from emerging markets has hit $80 billion during this crisis, the highest it has been in several years. Some industries, as we know, have been hurt, particularly hurt. The aviation industry has come down crushing. It is estimated by the Global Center of Aviation that all airlines will be bankrupt by May 2020 if the pandemic is prolonged, and in fact, keeping travel restrictions in place. It is estimated that the industry will lose up to 115 billion in revenues by June. As you know, our own national carrier, Kenya Airways, is grounded, and as you may have read, it's already seeking government support to stay afloat. The tourism and hospitality sectors have also come to a standstill, impacting thousands of jobs and thousands of households there too. The manufacturing sector, which has already been suffering from shocks from the Sino-US trade war, is caving in under the weight of the fresh supply chain disruptions from prolonged and unscheduled production shutdowns. Kenya's imports have dropped by over 60 billion shillings so far this year, mostly in industrial supplies and goods for household use. We can expect to see a further drop. Services, which had supported global demand and labor markets, are also wobbling as demand sharply wanes on the back of increased uncertainty and reduced incomes. Initial assessment of job markets by the International Labour Association shows that almost 25 million jobs may be lost globally, higher than the 22 million increase in unemployment during the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. Moreover, underemployment is also expected to increase as working hours and wages reduce. Those of you who follow news would have seen that America has recorded its highest ever unemployment claims this week. In Kenya, according to our in-house estimates, over 20,000 former jobs may be lost this year, with many more layoffs expected in the informal sector. Meanwhile, that does not include the number of jobs that may be followed. In other words, people becoming underemployed. You become underemployed when you're asked to work for 2 weeks and take 2 weeks off in a month. That is following all underemployment. We expect those numbers to increase dramatically, and we have already seen that to start to happen in a number of industries. Secondly is salary reductions. That also leads to underemployment. We again have seen an increase in that, and we expect many more sectors to declare salary reductions in the coming few weeks if this crisis continues to persist. Self-employment in developing countries, which often serves to cushion the consumers from shocks to incomes, may not do so this time because restrictions on movement of people, e.g. service providers and goods. That said, the struggle to save lives and the economy is presenting agonizing trade-offs for governments. Governments are dialing up financial support to cushion people and business to an unparalleled degree. As central banks reduce interest rates sharply and reintroduce or increase bond purchases, governments are piloting other unorthodox measures to supplement income losses and to firms to ensure they sustain their payroll. In Africa, where the number of infections and deaths are on the rise, governments have stepped up efforts to contain the pandemic. There are concerns over the continent's ability to effectively deal with the evolving contagion. The reality in each country may be different, but the responsibility is broadly the same. Getting through these extraordinary times will require collective effort and partners who can work across systems and sectors in contexts that are both complex and sometimes uncertain. Given the nature of the shocks we face today, it is obvious that fiscal policy may have to do the heavy lifting in reducing the economic fallout, notwithstanding the obvious strains on that end. The measures taken by government so far, providing some relief for consumers, protecting jobs, and bolstering business liquidity, are in this regard a step in the right direction. As a bank, here at NCBA, we acknowledge that we have a central role to play in supporting the economy during this crisis and facilitating a rapid and sustained recovery. The leadership by the central bank in providing liquidity for banks, lessening the financing costs for businesses, and allowing some flexibility in loan restructures is therefore very welcome. As your trusted financial partner, NCBA understands that the issue of working capital may prove existential for many businesses. To this end, we are already in individual conversations with our customers, some of you who are here, to understand the impact and implications for each of your respective businesses and work together through these uncharted waters. Your respective relationship managers are on hand to assist during this time. Given where we are today, allow me one second. Today, therefore, gives us an opportunity to look deeper into the effects of this crisis on our nation and our economy. Today we have, as announced by Rosalind, great speakers who walk us through, they will give us their views on what they see happening to our economy, but more importantly, give us the survival tools for this crisis. Therefore, I'd like to first welcome our first speaker to delve deeper into some of the points I've made. Our in-house economist, my colleague, Rafa Lagum, Director and Chief Economist, will share some of the bank's in-house view. Rafa.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for that a wonderful overview and introduction. Thank you too for your leadership at this time. It's really unprecedented. Good morning, everyone. CS Beatty, pleased to have you on board, and thanks for joining us. Now, for everyone, we are very pleased that you're able to come this early on a Friday morning to share your thoughts and also to listen to us as we try to make sense of these times. As John's note or overview has already illustrated, it's obvious that we're in very uncertain territory. There's probably just about 4 at a minimum, high impact uncertainty events that can rise to sudden crisis of this magnitude that would bring the whole world to a halt. The first, of course, would be, if you think about it, an all-out nuclear war. And from time and time again, those who follow the news media avidly see this coming out of Iran, North Korea from time and again. So it's growing hot and cold most of the time. Despite that heightened rhetoric geopolitically, of course, and increased trends of xenophobia, we thankfully have not been able to see this risk materialize. So, so far we are safe on that regard. The second event of uncertainty would of course be if an asteroid were to strike Mother Earth. And the astrophysicists on the call probably would understand this better. I must confess I'm not cognitively able to wrap my head around that, but that would be a high impact uncertain event that would be of serious consequences for us all. The third event would be something related to climate change catastrophe. And if you want to think about it, Hurricane Katrina sort of gives us a small dose of what this would look like. The only thing is you have to factor in some sort of steroid jolt to be able to see how high impact this would be. Just a couple of weeks ago, we would have thought, and obviously infectious diseases would have made the list as the fourth high impact uncertain event with tragic consequences. I'm using that phrase in past tense. The reason is this fact has actually materialized, and as John's notes have already illustrated, this is what we are confronting today, where coronavirus disease, COVID-19, is ravaging throughout the world with tragic consequences for us all. I understand from epidemiologists that this is the newest of the family of coronaviruses. You may all recall the Middle East respiratory syndrome, MERS, SARS, and this now being the latest member of that family that always from time to time can infect both humans and animals. As at this morning, and I think John alluded to this, the consequences of this crisis at the public health level has risen to just over 900,000 deaths. Cases of confirmed coronavirus positive. And then we have almost over 45,000 deaths by World Health Organization numbers this morning. Now, obviously, the reason we are convened this morning, and I'm very glad to meet all of you, albeit virtually, is to try and make sense of what this means, at least first from an economic perspective, but also generally on how we keep ourselves alive and with minimum sort of impact as possible. I'm reminded of a very great social scientist, Frank Knight, who gave a useful distinction that may help us navigate, or rather think about these moments a little bit more conceptually with a lot of accuracy. So Knight is reputed for making the useful distinction between risk and uncertainty. Whereas the risks are easily quantifiable objectively, and you can use statistical models to do this. Uncertain outcomes, of course, we do not have enough knowledge to objectively quantify future scenarios in any meaningful way. And I would hazard that this indeed is one such moment. We are in a Knightian uncertainty moment for sure. And to make it worse, I think we are having complexity at two levels. So at the epidemiological public health level, it is still not yet known. All the properties of this virus, coronavirus, are not yet understood. As a matter of fact, listening to BBC this morning, there's a huge debate about methods of transmission, including whether or not masks would be helpful. I think you may have seen in the US, I think they're trying to move that direction, even though WHO sort of advice seems to be static for now. So we not only have not understood the full extent of properties of this virus, but also at the second complexity to it remains on the notion of asymptomatic patients, whom we still don't yet understand exactly how, what risks they pose to us. Then at the economic level, because of course the crisis, as John has alluded to, has moved on into a full-fledged economic crisis with significant shocks across the board. So at that real economy level, in order to respond to the crisis that we are having with our health dynamics, we've had to literally freeze significant sections or components of our macroeconomy, reducing output only to essentials. And if you reduce your economy by tic-tac to the point where all production that's happening will only remain those of essentials, you can imagine what sort of contraction that would entail. And sure enough, if you've seen from the responses that are coming forward, we are beginning to see that even from the policy toolkits alone, traditional policy responses are still trying to really get to understand where this is going. So in trying to infer the future trajectory of this development, we have we sort of took a scenario approach as NCBA, and what we have seen is every recovery effort from a crash. If you have shock on the economy, there obviously will be at some point, if you're as hopeful as us, that this will turn around. And so the shape or future path of that growth, what we call the geometry of the recovery, often could take what is the most hopeful scenario, either a V-shaped recovery, and the different nuances of that V-shape, or in some cases, you'll also find a U-shaped sort of recovery. So we've illustrated about 3 scenarios, which we are calling the base case, in which case the assumptions there are that output is displaced only with a sharp dip in Q2, followed by a gradual recovery in Q3 and Q4. The current horizontal interdiction efforts by the government and by different agencies manage to flatten the curve sooner, and so we avoid a lockdown. In this scenario, what we see is agriculture maintains its already latent growth potential, and so supports a bit of the base effects that would be able to forestall rapid economic deterioration. On the other scenario is what we are calling the shallow V-shape, which scenario assumes that the contagion is disrupted early enough, and so that what we have seen so far was actually coming in time. Assuming that is a scenario, then we have a very shallow V-shaped recovery. Economic policies that are put in place would be effective in this scenario, and globally also the contagion is arrested and travel restrictions lifted. That's our scenario 2. And then, of course, we have what we're calling the doomsday scenario, which is in traditional geometry of recoveries, is the U-shaped sort of recovery trajectory. In this scenario, the current containment measures are late and fail to arrest the contagion. The extended real economy freeze lasts longer than 4 or 5 months. The policies are not effective, and then output recovers but maintains only considerable gap to the pre-crisis levels. So with those 3 scenarios, we then went back to the National Bureau of Statistics data, going back to 2012, and we've tried to model from historical performance using the sector approach, and particularly paying attention to the respective shocks that we had in the previous times, this being the post-election crisis and the global financial crisis of 2010-2009. This would then help us tease out how our sectors from agriculture, mining, all the way out to tourism and hotel and accommodation have responded to instances of shock. I have to note that it's early days, and to be frank, these whole shocks appear mute in magnitude compared to what we are staring at the moment. So if you, our model suggests that on a base case scenario, what is a normal V-shaped progression recovery, growth will contract to about 2.3%. And with particular hit coming remarkably from, of course, as you all seen, accommodation and restaurants. In this scenario, confidence is somewhat shaken, but it's still paltry there. So even though consumption and production is reduced to essentials, you are getting pockets of resistance from the other side of the non-essential sides of the economy. The recent tax incentives and monetary easing policy responses that we've seen are somewhat beginning to take root. And so this is really the scenario that you take as a base case in our model. The best case scenario, what is a shallow V-shape, would get us about a contraction of only 170 basis points. Keep in mind that when we last met in January, our outlook was at about 5.7% of GDP growth for 2020. Now, the obvious import of this has serious consequences to our macroeconomic management generally, but specifically because of the fiscal responses that have had to be put in place, we have seen instances where our fiscal space is beginning to even be overly stretched. Already at 7.7% deficit, it was already a concern. With the suggested policy responses so far, we expect that from a revenue side, of course, you've seen the revenue incentives that come from government. And what we then see with a growth scenario of 2.3% is a situation where our deficit moves to over double digit, in actual fact, 1.18 trillion, and that's about 10.4% of GDP. The other consequence, of course, of this forecast would be on the external side. So if you think about it, the pressures coming out of disruptions of global supply chains has implications for our current account at a time when our economy has significant interlinkages with the outside world, particularly notably China, which is at the highest. Now, in this scenario, of course, our balance of payment dynamics is very sensitive to developments out of the global realm. And we project that given what's playing out, the likely pressure on the currency is going to be huge. And we expect that even though there's been very stable and very decent management from the central bank, we have revised our forecast southward. So we think pressure on the currency will be something that is of significant concern. In the final case, of course, is to just make a quick commentary on the policy responses this far. We think that there is room for some further monetary policy sort of responses. You may have seen the reduction of CRR from 5.25% to 4.25%, and also the CBR being reduced by 100 basis points. There's still room for that, granted, of course, that you have to have a clear eye on what implications that southward drift on the current interest rate outlook also will have on the currency. The fiscal responses this far, in our view, have been very adequate, but insofar as it's dealing with the disaster aspects of this crisis. So in terms of just keeping people alive, it's not, if I say, a traditional stimulus in the sense as we understand it, because as I've said already, economic output has been by decree sort of reduced to just production on the essential sides of the economy. And so what would be stimulative actually addresses demand side problems, which would target directly the non-essential side of which you may all have seen because of the need for social distancing and such like policies to address the epidemiological problem on the public health side have had to freeze. So as John has mentioned, we are ready, and I need to state that our analysis is morphing literally every hour. We are receiving new information literally every day, and we are continuing to sharpen our models to be able to see where we come out at the end of this crisis, because indeed, we believe that the crisis will end at some point, even if we don't know when. So with that, I'd like to hand over to back to my boss, Mr. John Gashora.
Thank you, Rafa, for that very detailed view. I hope our clients on the line and friends can see what this portends for us. Some of it quite scary. If you look at the scenarios that Rafa talked about, possible outcomes could be quite scary. But that's the reason we're having this call, so that we can work together and hold hands, not literally, but hold hands to work through this crisis. At this juncture, joining us this morning, as announced earlier, is the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development, Honorable Betty Maina. I know a number of you would have interacted with her when she was the Chief Executive of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, where she served for 11 years. She understands the industry's pains well. But just quickly, prior to her being appointed as a Cabinet Secretary, she served as the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, State Department of Industrialization, and State Department of East African Affairs. She has also served as the Chief Executive of Kenya Association of Manufacturers for 11 years, as I mentioned, where she not only oversaw the doubling of membership of the association, but also established 7 satellite offices to complement the services offered at the national level. At this point, I'd like to welcome her. And even as I do so, please also remember to congratulate her. It happens to be her birthday, so she's taking time off celebrating her birthday to be with us. So, Honorable Maina, we really appreciate it. Over to you, Honorable Maina.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you for the warm message on my birthday. Yes, it does happen to be, so it's a nice day to be out here as well and learning these new ways of working, and hopefully we are clear. At least I hope people can see us and everything. I think thank you very much also for inviting me to join you for this forum today. It's been just about a month since I took over, but I read somewhere, I saw somewhere, somebody saying I've lived in many decades, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. And finally they said, got to 2020, and they said actually in March 2020 feels a bit like a decade. And I guess that's what it feels like for all of us. As mentioned, I think the COVID-19 has been with us now for about 4 months, and we've seen the rollout starting with China. It has rapidly moved to the rest of the world, and I don't know if there's a continent that is not touched. By this morning, I heard that we've passed more than 1 million people infected so far, and about 50,000, I think it was about 15,000 deaths or something like that. Actually, I think it's more than that. So it's become, it's become a bit of a real concern. I think from the government side, we're concerned about many things, and I think the biggest one, of course, is the health concern. The government set up a National Emergency Response Committee on the 28th of February, which has led a lot of the work in response. And that work has been around the preparations for dealing with the health issues once it reaches Kenya. And a lot of the measures that have been taken have been intended to reduce the pressure on health services should people become ill. All the measures announced so far around social distancing, the re-emphasis on hygiene, the re-emphasis on changes in working, especially working from home and meeting, such as we're doing today, are really intended to reduce the spread of the disease, because it is spread through human contact. That has had ramification for the economy, which Raphael has spoken about and now speak about, because in essence, you're freezing economic activity. Social distancing means that there is a limitation on activities that can take place in an attempt to ensure that we don't have a run on our health facilities. On its own, and given the recovery rates around the world, corona is not fatal as fatal as some other flus that we've had in the past. But I think the fatality comes from pressure on health services. And I think that's something that Kenyans haven't pretty much understood, because you don't see so many ill people around you. And first of all, you don't know who's ill. You don't see so many ill people. So there are some people who've been rather skeptical about the measures that government has put in place. And you see quite a few people still continuing to conduct their lives as if nothing mattered or nothing has changed, which is a little, I think, a bit of a disappointment, and the health minister has shared that as much. And it's been obviously difficult to keep publicizing pictures of ill people in an attempt to show people that it is really something serious. The other arrangements that government has undertaken is really focusing on tracing any of the people. We announced the first case of corona in the country about 3 weeks, a little bit over 3 weeks ago. And part of it, in order to manage very scarce resources, has been a very aggressive program of tracing contacts of those who have been suspected or might have contacts of contacts. And that's how the testing arrangement has been geared so far. I think now with cases of local transmission, I think it will be inevitable that we really need to crank up a bit more the testing regime. And I expect that over the next few weeks, we'll see much more testing. And the third has been physical preparations. There's been a lot of work done to expand capacity of hospitals and advance, or at least increase capacity of isolation centers and such medical facilities. Many of our hospitals have expanded their critical care facilities, and we've seen an increase in that. But I think going forward, we are also, as if you begin to have full-blown community transmission, then we obviously need to increase our capacities for isolation facilities. And that's what government has done, identifying institutions and spaces that can host isolation centers, and putting in place the measures to do that. Another mode of preparation from the health side has been on expanding our capacity for health commodities. And I'm sure you've all seen that in the press in recent times, the appeal for support in cranking up supply for health facilities and health commodities, both for health purposes, but also for social purposes. The minister has announced that really all of us, though people are skeptical, but I think right now it's much better to be more cautious than to be skeptical. And therefore, I hope all of you have acquired your masks, because it will be a requirement, and it will be advisable that as you get out of home, you have your mask. I was wearing mine earlier, but I think for all of you, we need to encourage you to put on your mask, encourage your family members, your mates, everybody. If they're going out into the public and meeting others, it's important that they wear their masks. We have seen some increase in compliance by Kenyans as well, though some might not be compliant, but I think more people really are becoming much more aware. The cessation of shaking hands. For instance, I don't know the last time I shook anybody's hand. I hope you don't either. No, a very, very minimal hugging. So there's at least some level of compliance in that regard. On the economic side, the measures that have been taken to manage this have been spoken to by Raphael, and I don't want to go into that very much because I think they are fairly well known. The measures that have been undertaken by the central bank to support banks in order to support the rest of the economy, and I hope that you as a bank as extending the same to your customers. In terms of other things that now we are beginning to obviously consider is the measures that have been taken are really intended to support others who are in essential services to continue production and to depress, and have led to a depression of discretionary consumption, and that has ramification for the economy. We've been very hit hard by in the tourism sector and hospitality sector because all these social distancing measures depress the hospitality sector the most. The reduction of footfall into malls, except to supermarkets, has been noticed, and some of your clients who are in these fields of discretionary consumption, people in other retail sectors, have really informed us of depressed demand, and we see that going into at least 2 quarters until we can contain the social spread of this disease. So some of the things that we've done, certainly as a ministry, is to continue that we remained open to business, to understand their challenges and to see how we can tackle it. The first prognosis when we first met with business about 5 weeks ago, because I've had weekly meetings. We've had weekly meetings with business associations and different businesses. And when we first met at the beginning of March, was it March? I think, yeah, beginning of March, end of February, we thought the first impact was on reduced inflows of supplies, especially supplies from China. 2 weeks later, I think when we met, the grave situation was not so much of depressed supplies for inputs, but actually depressed markets in Europe and America once the disease and once the social distancing measures were put in place. We've seen especially depressed demand for our flowers, depressed demand for our textiles and garment factories, and actually we've seen cancellation of orders or postponement of orders. So the response has been to support those who are now in these export and exposed sectors. When I last met them this week, the demand for flowers is coming back up, which is good. The demand for horticultural products, especially processed products, is actually cranked up quite a bit. And now we have another challenge, which is the challenge of freight. Most of these went through passenger planes, but with the withdrawal of air travel and passenger travel, we have a few cargo planes that are still running, but obviously therefore there is constrained capacity in that regard. And where am I going with this is that I think these experiences, certainly the experiences with this is that as some businesses suffer, there's probably opportunities for others. I've been speaking to my colleague this morning about utilization of excess capacity of Kenya Airways, perhaps even turning that into utilization for cargo with all the different modifications, and that may provide a lifeline for the airline in this business. the depressed supply and the great requirement for medical commodities is also turning it into an opportunity for our businesses to explore and look at new opportunities. In Kenya, I think you've seen some excitement around mass production by the small and medium enterprises. And once we, and therefore, we begin to look at this. And I think as I end, the message I think for us from to the business community is, one, we need to work together in managing this crisis, because that it is really is a crisis. So we need to keep working together to handle the situation, which is the health situation, and in terms of the resolution of this situation. But at the same time, we need to prepare for life after Corona, or during and after Corona. So new business models are emerging. The food delivery business has seen quite some resurgence in basically the courier and the delivery services have seen a resurgence and a greater demand in recent times. And part of our interventions with business has been to explore how we can further facilitate such businesses. But it does give us an opportunity to begin to think about alternatives. Within the ministry, we are looking at cranking up more manufacturing, and the analysis that we've done and reviewing our trade deficit shows us that it is actually possible to internalize and to substitute for a lot of these imports. I think the message coming out of this for us is that the world and the economy will not be the same after Corona, and especially the global supply chains will not be the same. The need to ensure that there is greater security of supply means that we must innovate businesses and that can be able to supply this. So in the meantime, I think that what we really all need to be working, because Corona is also not permanent, no epidemic is permanent. So it's also important for businesses as they navigate this space to ensure that they are working in supporting their employees particularly. And I think we remain open to receiving ideas on how businesses can be supported to retain their employees, even if you're mothballing them, for lack of a better word, with unpaid leave. I think at least maintaining a relationship with the employees is going to be very important. For banks such as yourself, as NCBA, maintaining a relationship with your customers to ensure that they can maintain these employees. And we've been quite excited to see some products come on stream from some different banks that give Lifeline financing for their businesses that are in distress for this time. So I hope that as NCBA, you're also, and would like to hear some of your own measures to support your clients type this, because none of this situation isn't permanent. And if a real estate client, for instance, is suffering from low rentals because of low footfalls into the supermarkets or into the malls, I think it's important that such businesses are supported. On our own part, we're starting to actively think of instruments that can be utilized by government and in partnership with the banking sector to support SMEs. And we would be hopefully receiving some of your ideas because we need to try and conclude on this in the very near future. So let me end there by saying I think we, as a government, I'm persuaded that we've done everything to respond to the health crisis and to prepare for it. You can never be too prepared, but I think we are doing our very best in supporting the economy and supporting the essential services and production, at least continued production. But it's really important that employers and Kenyans in general take seriously the measures that have been put in place so that we can maintain or at least flatten the curve as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CS, for those remarks. And I just picked up a few things coming out of it. One is challenging, it's a challenge to NCBA. I can assure our clients and customers on the line that we are doing everything possible to support you, and please do not hesitate to contact us to support you as you go through this period. I think the CS talked about products she's seen from other banks. I can assure you we are at the forefront of that innovation to support businesses at this time. I'd also urge our customers that there's life post-corona. I think the CA has mentioned that clearly. There's life post-corona. One of the things that we're working with some of our customers to think about is what you need post-corona. Helping you slow down on some of the investments you're doing now, at least making sure that your business models are ready for post-corona. Also, we think there'll be quite a bit of need to restructure businesses post-corona. So our NCBA investment bank is also on standby to assist businesses as they look to restructure their balance sheets going forward. I think the CS talked about the need to maintain relationships. I think that is key. We're advising our customers to ensure that they maintain relationships with their suppliers, even when you tell them that you're not able to pay them. Make sure you maintain the relationships. It's good to do so. I think there is also the fact that post-corona, the need to secure supply will become a necessity for most countries. I think CS didn't say it exactly the way I thought she would, which is to say that the focus for every government would be to boost its own manufacturing capacity, its own ability to secure supplies. And I think in that respect, we can expect to hear a lot from the CS post this period. So life will not be the same post-corona. Let me hand it over now to Rosalind.
Okay, so thank you very much, John. Thank you for your comments made earlier. Allow me to also acknowledge our in-house economist, Raphael, for his comments. And of course, Honorable Betty Minor, thank you for your comments. Just before we move into the panel discussion, I would like to ask you all to pose your questions in the Q&A tab that is just below the screen. Share your questions, give us your comments. I think as Raphael mentioned, information and insights are unfolding daily. So this is really just the beginning of a conversation that we would like to continue. So at this point, I will now turn to Raphael, who will be moderating the panel with Honorable Betty Minor, our Group MD, John Gashora, Kwame Owino, who is the CEO of the Institute of Economic Affairs, as well as Washeken Dwati, who is the founder and CEO of Centonomy. And joining the panel as well will be John Okulo, who is our Group Director, Corporate Banking. So a very warm welcome to our panel, and I will hand over to Raphael to moderate the session.
Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, CS Betty. I think it's been very enlightening to us to just see how deliberate the government is approaching this scenario. And indeed, you've given us significant hope in these unprecedented times. I think it would be fair to have our two panelists who haven't sort of given their opening remarks to just give us a sense of what they see of this, and perhaps react to John, Betty, and myself in terms of just what we have shared so far. So I'd encourage you, as Rosalind has said, to please post your questions on the Q&A tab, and so that our panelists can be able to respond to all your concerns. I think I'll start with Kwame to sort of open up with just initial thoughts before I take the Q&A.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for the introduction. Well, I just think that it's true. I mean, 2 months ago, I was seated in another panel, and we were talking about growth 5.5 and above. I just have to say that I think this pandemic has actually thrown everybody a curveball, because in my view, when it first started, I actually thought that at the best it would simply slash growth for Kenya by a small amount, and then after some time there would be I think some of the scenarios that you've raised suggest that there's a small but real chance that actually the economy might not just slow down, it could even contract, depending on how far this goes. And that's, of course, is unprecedented. We've had growth rates, even when they're not so good, but we've had positive growth rates over time. So a situation in which a contraction takes place obviously calls for the second point that I'll be making. And that second point is that I think for the time being, of course, as students of economics, what you know is first, the economy is about people. And what that means is government has to do all it does. I mean, it's best at this time to deal with the health side, which is a significant challenge on its own. And that requires unprecedented aligning of social objectives with business objectives, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do. But obviously, I think that's part of why we are where we are. I think to give credit to it as well, we've had this information coming. I think we could question how quickly we are doing the tests. And obviously that also makes our lead time into cutting the tail of the epidemic as it goes along in terms of flattening the curve. But I think the information that goes out there allows us at least to make some decent, or rather to draw a decent picture about what's happening. What I still find a bit interesting is how do we deal with the fact that, and I think it's mostly an urban more than a rural problem, because everybody talks about what they call a lockdown. To be honest, for me, I'm not even sure what it is, but it also has a very aggressive military metaphor, when my thinking is basically it's actually a stay where you are and as much as is possible to cut movements. But whatever it is, when it comes, and every single statement from the peers has suggested that it will be coming sooner than later, the view is actually preparation. And whether everybody is prepared or not is a different matter. But obviously, once that happens, definitely the slowdown will be real, and the possibility that a lot of economic activity that needs to take place will not take place. And that is what suggests to me that it's the real possibility is actually that we'll not have a V-shaped recovery. There will be a U-shaped recovery, which one of the scenarios suggests. I was surprised as well by Lifeline mentioning that there will be pressure on the currency. But I think the pressure on the currency is something that's been expected for a while. But as I conclude, for me, the reason I am even more worried that it's possible, because it's possible for the health crisis to pass, as it certainly will, is the idea that it actually isn't the only shock that the Kenyan economy has received, in the sense that we already had lockers coming around, and a second phase of that would be coming. At the same time, we also had a slowdown which was happening and which was real. So the convergence of these three factors puts Kenya in a very, very peculiar situation. And I think it would require the best of government juggling all the balls and handling everything properly to ensure that something doesn't drop. But the final point, I think, is that the biggest test here is actually government's credibility. Because to execute what is required for us to get out of this requires that government is trusted in its word and in its action. I don't know what everybody seems to think, but on the whole, it certainly is much better than it is. But my view is that government's credibility would be on show right here, because I think the possibility of a crisis such as this coming from a health crisis, of course it's an economic crisis, and rolling back to the political is real, even if it's something that we Kenyans are not addressing at this moment. But on the whole, I think, yes, we have a crisis committee. I think the president has addressed this, and everybody seems to think about it. One final one is, how do we, I mean, the cushioning, I think the cushioning that individual banks are taking, or rather financial institutions are talking about on their own, is a fine thing. But I also see that as we have people shop, because people are preparing to restock their houses and everything else, of course it's driving up prices and it's giving the panic buying. What government must not do, in my view, is that there are many ideas that will be thrown about what government can do to alleviate the situation, and it must do some things. What concerns us at the Institute of Economic Affairs is the things that might be popular and which government must not do. And among those is basically to believe that you can actually throw money at this problem. I think we'll have to be very careful because we have little fiscal space. But the second one is, I see a dedicated, even coming from some MPs, and they're well-meaning, the view that we might have to actually institute price controls or even some kind of rationing. That would be a dangerous one. So as we talk about everything else, I think let's not forget the part that, as Betty has said correctly, the economy will still be here. I think the health part crisis will pass, and as soon as it passes, we need to boost all engines and actually make sure we are going forward. To institute policy measures which might be popular in the time, for the time being, but which will make that recovery even more difficult would be responsible. Thanks.
Thanks, Kwame. I think the bet you're making on the shape or geometry of the recovery is welcome. I think the U-shaped scenario puts that as zero growth, which is in actual fact literally negative and serious contraction. I think we can debate that in the days ahead. And if you've seen the assumptions under our U-shaped scenario, presume that you move from horizontal interdiction to what you say you don't understand in terms of just complete lockdown. And then, of course, we're assuming that the policy responses this far under that scenario is completely inadequate for the reason that the distinction between traditional stimulus, which policy toolboxes have, and which is what we have applied this far, completely missing the point about the nature of the essential, non-essential, and real economy freezes dynamic that is playing out. So thank you very much for those initial remarks. Let me invite Washeke to also share our take on what's unfolding. So Washeke, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Raphael. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to NCBA, John Gashara, Rosalind, for having me here. Thank you to all the panelists. It's been really great to hear your remarks. Yes, but everybody else. I think I just concur with a lot of what has been said, and I know that we have to deal with this situation, and there are a couple of things we always go through. First is fear, which is where we don't want to be. Then we have to apply caution and we have to adapt. So we have to do what we have to survive, but as has been said, we can't forget there's the other side. So firstly, I just want to speak to the individual about just the things that you can do at your level, just basically bringing everything that has been said on economic level to how does this actually affect the individual and their personal finances, and what can you actually do about it? So first, I think it's just, we've got to be cautious with our money because we've got to stretch the shilling. What we had has now got to last us longer. A lot of people have lost jobs, and others are taking pay cuts, and others, even if they do have an income, nobody knows how long this is going to last for. We're hearing this could be another quarter, another 2 quarters. So we've just got to be really careful with our money. And traditionally, when we do budgets, things like budgets, we have needs and we have wants. So needs are the things that are basic food, water that you need, and wants are the extras that we have. But I think for COVID, I think we have to add another layer in between, so that if you think of your budget, this is what individuals should do. Separate it into A, B, and C. A are the absolute essentials. You will die without them. For example, food, for example, shelter, for example, water, for example, electricity. B is the things that are important, they have value to you, but at the moment there's a possibility for negotiation. And I'm speaking particularly to those whose sources of income, whether it's in business or salaries, has been disrupted. So B, you could find things like it's loans that you're like, yes, I am repaying a loan at the moment, but if I've lost my income, is this what I can renegotiate? B could be things that people used to do that are nice, like going to the gym, and now you're like, we're not going to gyms anyway, so that's money I can put elsewhere. B could sometimes be landlords that can be renegotiated. So you have your A, the things you need to do to live, but now introduce another aspect to your money, which is, I know I need these things, they are important, but for now, is there a possibility of negotiating on them? And then C is everything else, usually entertainment-driven expenses that we need to now be very, very cautious with. Because what we're trying to do here is whatever money people have at the moment is to make it stretch as long as possible. And a lot of the times when income is disrupted, people don't have control because they're not aware about which pocket or which basket their money is actually going into. So if you do have some money right now, it's to see how long can I survive on my at least my A expenses. If you have 100,000 shillings and your ABC was 100,000 shillings, you've only got 1 month. But if you have 100,000 shillings and now you see your A is 30,000 shillings, that means you've got 3 months of survival. And this just doesn't apply just to individuals, it's also businesses, because businesses at the moment, it's cash flow. So you're looking at where do I need to deploy my cash flow at the moment. We've talked about adaptability, because this is not just about getting through Corona, it's also about understanding that there's going to be a different life on the other side and keeping our eyes open to how is that life actually going to look at. So even for an individual who's sitting and wondering, maybe I've taken a pay cut, it's not just sitting home, it's actually saying, what do I have? What skills do I have? At Centonomy, we tend to call them non-financial assets, and this is the time to use them. Seeing people who you know, things like they like cooking, they're earning some sort of income, or they've taken a partial pay cut, but they like cooking. So they're saying, oh, I can now deliver home cooked meals for people, because they know people are sitting at home, sometimes without help, and can actually take advantage of that. So apart from being cautious with our money, we've also got to keep our eyes to what are the opportunities out there. And if you have funds, not everybody's income has been cut. If you have money that's beyond your survival for a couple of months, it's also to understand, and history has shown us that money is also made in this period. The stock market prices that we are seeing now may not be there next year or in 2 years' time. So it's also to understand that, do I have money to actually do those kind of investments now? For us business, especially the SMEs, it's all about cash flow and a working capital. And again, it's minimizing expenses and understanding which expenses are necessary business to continue running and which ones are not. So the necessary ones could be your employees. I am a big proponent of keep people in jobs as much as possible. Let removing jobs be the last case scenario for any business. But it's also saying, can I collect money faster? If I am product or service, it may be hard, but is there a possibility of taking things like deposits? Can I negotiate with my suppliers for some sort of credit? Can I come to banks, like my banking partner, like NCBA, and work out something so that I can have cash revolving in my business? Because it's all going to be about having cash flow to be able to meet. Now, it's not so much about the funky P&L words that we like talking about. It's how much cash do I have and how do I efficiently deploy it? The incentives that were announced by the president, it's just looking at them and saying, how can I leverage on this for my business? And I know a couple of people are already using that PAYE. The PAYE cuts really benefits the higher end of the scale, but it's, if you're thinking about telling people to take pay cuts, that can be something that you can use so that it's not that drastic to them. It's understanding, can I use money, that kind of money, even whatever has been freed up, to even do things like survival kits. I know businesses like hairdressers that have been impacted. There's nobody coming to the salon. They've lost revenue immediately. So they're now looking at, I may not be able to pay people, but can I actually put survival kits? So in all this, we're saying we have to survive, but we're also trying to be human and also trying to adapt to the opportunities. For any business that should be out there, is to remember we do have an entrepreneurial spirit, and our entrepreneurial spirit has always made us problem solvers. So it's just to start to understand, what is the new problem that I need to solve? I can use Centonomy as an example. 3 weeks ago, we were running physical training classes. So we were going into our courses and we're training people face to face. In a span of 2 days, we had to move all of that to online. But while we are online, we're now starting to see a different world. People from other countries, people from other counties can come on board. So I think it's for every business to ask themselves, what are the gaps at the moment and how do I fill them? Like has been mentioned, people who make clothes are now making protective equipment, yeah? People are doing deliveries. I like the example the CS gave of KQ and the possibility of them as a lot more of their freight to cargo. So I guess I'll just summarize by saying it's that just being cautious. Let us stretch the shilling as much as possible. Let us understand that when we are fearful, we'll do things like panic buying, which is working against us, yeah? But it's just saying, what do I need to be cautious? Can I survive? How do I stretch my money so I can survive 1 month, the next 1 month, 3 months, 6 months of my absolute necessary expenses? But beyond that, what either for me as an individual to reinvent and use more of my skills, or even for a business to totally understand what gap can I play. Talk to your customers and understand what problem can now be solved, and understand that at the end of the day, especially for SMEs, your customer will never be the same. So we've got to start preparing for how that new customer will actually be. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Washeke, for those practical tips on how we begin to navigate these times at the personal household level. Certainly very interesting conversation about business models and the opportunities that are coming out. And in the stream of questions that I see, there's so much concern about potential opportunities. But maybe it's a good time to segue to my colleague, John Okulo, to also give his opening remarks, at least to the traditional Kenyan corporate. How do they see this moment, and how do you think they should think about this crisis as we ride through it? John?
Thank you very much, Raphael. Honorable CS, thank you for joining us today. And to our customers, thank you for logging in. Our panelists, much appreciated. And I would simply want to echo some of the comments that have been made by the Honorable CS, our Group MD, and of course, Washeke Ndwati, because what applies to the individual, as Washeke mentioned, also applies to the companies and businesses. And when we're speaking about companies and businesses, let's not forget other organizations that are impacted by this. They're the NGOs, they're the churches, they're the entities that have been trying to reach the underserved and more needy people in our society, and suddenly they cannot deliver their services because of a social distance. But what the CS mentioned is really key, because what we're seeing is that in the space of 4 weeks, certain industries that have moved from a point where they were facing disaster have been seeing a pickup in demand, such as horticulture. And the many ideas that are coming through with respect to import substitution, developing some of the medical, producing some of the medical equipment locally, is what really should inspire the business community that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And sorry, I forgot to mention Kwame Owino also, who spoke before me and made some very important comments, especially on the tests that the government is going through with respect to credibility. Now, a lot of the people that at least I've spoken to have really congratulated the government for taking this pandemic and dealing with it as early as possible. The number one priority with respect to future financial sustainability is the ability of all of us to work together with the government in ensuring that we're dealing with a health crisis. Because financial survival will depend on how long this crisis lasts. The quicker we deal with it, the quicker we move from the point of uncertainty that Raphael spoke about to one of risk management and risk mitigation. And as a financial service provider, it's always much easier for us to provide the required liquidity, to provide the required debt and support to companies when we're dealing with in an environment of mitigating risks, as opposed to one of uncertainty. I'd say the CS also clearly outlines the different, the impacts that different industries are facing. For example, we have customers who are in the ICT field. Their challenge is not a drop in demand. Their challenge is how do we get data connectivity to as many people as possible who are working from home? How do we get all these conferences going? Yeah. So for them, it's a question of how do they fulfill demand when their supply chain has been dislocated. Yeah. Same for those who provide medical equipment. Now, if you're in the healthcare field, if you're a dentist, then things may be very different for you because you may not be getting that many people coming for dental care. But if you're supplying medicine that is currently in short supply, then what you're looking at is how do you bridge that funding gap after you have found the medicine, which a lot of companies are no longer allowing to be exported. Yeah, that then brings in the aspect of import substitution that the CS spoke about. From an import substitution perspective, I think there are really great opportunities for this country. Everyone here has said that don't burn your bridges with your suppliers. Keep your best people because you'll need them. Look after your customers. Now, for us as a country, we have global suppliers who are now struggling on how they can ship their goods and products, into the region. I'll think that this is a great opportunity for our customers to start developing relationships where they can produce some of these products locally. Some of our customers have also had their projects stalled because the engineers who are working on them from India or other countries had to leave because of restricted travel. Now, how do we use our local engineers who are currently out of jobs? How do we use them to actually step in and complete some of these projects? Washeke spoke about a key issue, which is a cash preservation. And cash preservation in this time depends on which side of the field you are. Yeah, if you're on the ICT and in an industry that has high demand, then what you're looking for is liquidity to be able to meet that demand and making sure that whoever you're selling these products to is actually able to pay you. However, if you're in an industry that has been hard hit, like the hospitality or travel, what you really need to look at is your cash burn ratio. And you need to look at that very carefully. And that ratio is basically a function of your outflows versus your inflows. As Washeke mentioned, it's not a question of your P&L right now. It's a question of how much cash is coming in and how much is going out. So from a banking perspective, what we've done with our customers is those who require breathing space, a moratorium for 3 months or 6 months, we're looking at those requests, and for many of them, we've been able to accommodate those requests. Others are looking at the bank providing a bit of funding to help them settle some of the payments that they have to make for their staff members, who they may be sending on a longer and unexpected leave. So we're also looking at those requests. And I think what is most important is, even as we as the banking industry provide this type of accommodation, we need to work together with our customers and listen to what they're doing in trying to create a bit more certainty for the future. Now, when I speak about certainty, is that this crisis may be with us for a long time, or it may end. Yeah, it may end earlier than we expect. But every business, every organization needs to start planning and thinking on, if COVID remains with us for the long term, how am I going to restructure my operations? So Raphael, I think this requires a lot of partnership and working together.
Certainly, and thank you, John, for that candid sort of outlook, and also illustrating just our capacity and indeed intention to be with our clients very close at this time. Lots of questions coming in, so I'll open it up for the panel interaction. As I said, you can keep posting your views or questions on the Q&A tab. Lots of birthday wishes to the CS. So Betty, lots of happy birthday messages. And I guess that means that you take the first question as well. So there's a first question to CS Betty. Basically, to what extent is the government ready to protect the vulnerable in the event of a lockdown? I know Kwame has a contra view about whether or not a lockdown is actually feasible, but should we go that route, because we've seen that adopted elsewhere? The question to you is, to what extent is the government ready to protect the vulnerable?
All right, thank you very much, Raphael, and thank you for the birthday wishes. I think there are several questions around that I've seen on the screen, and I've answered some. I don't know whether that is what I should have done. But anyway, I think there are things we need to be certain about, is that the government is not about to let its people suffer necessarily. So I know there's a lot of skepticism sometimes bred by the media, which is really unfortunate. But in reality, governments really don't set out to, they don't set out to harm people at all. On the contrary, they do everything to protect. So there is already an elaborate plan on, and program on social assistance and cash transfer for vulnerable people. And those have been mapped out. And I think the Inua Jamii and related programs have been in place for more than nearly 10 years now. So in the context of this, we obviously see an expansion of that program, and that was announced by the president. But the other thing is also mapping out some of the newly vulnerable who may be recently vulnerable, and extending support to them. So that will continue, and that and there's an elaborate, like I said, there's an elaborate plan drawn up, including mapping locations and transport routes should you need to get to people. Government's also been quite, and I think that has been announced before, that a lot of the assistance will come through e-vouchers and vouchers rather than physical supply of food, because we've had challenges with physical supply of food. So I think the plan at this point is really to use electronic means. That's already working with agricultural inputs, as you're aware, and that will be expanded to support programs. And I think that maybe I can take that. The other question, and I think it was a challenge that came out of John, is that this really is an opportunity to boost manufacturing in Kenya, and we were already on course to work on that. But I think there is greater impetus for focusing on areas that we can grow as we come out of this program. As I mentioned in my remarks, we've just concluded analysis of potential manufacturing and investment spaces that could be interesting for Kenya, and Kenya is competitive in. So the garment industry is one of them, and that will receive some more attention. Pharmaceutical sector is also one of those areas. I've seen one of the posts by Vimal. Of course, most indicates that, yes, we have that great potential, and congratulations, Vimal, on the work that you continue to do. But we'd really like to localize a lot of pharmaceutical chains, including going into areas such as vaccine production. So as we utilize this space and the rest space that is provided a bit by Corona and Corona preparation, is that this needs to be cranked up a little bit more. Possibilities in computer and electronic products, we already have some surface mounted technology assembly happening here in Kenya, and I think we can take that to expand and into more light manufacturing in industries. The food processing and processed food market is immense for us. I've seen a post by Tiku, or one of the questions around the fact that demand has actually already picked up for these sectors, even in this context of depressed movement. But going forward, as we look at the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and others, there's great opportunities. So I think the answer is, this is an opportunity to rethink our manufacturing and to encourage, maybe within CBA, you should have a caucus on stimulating, stimulating manufacturing within the country. We have some interest from British firms, a pipe deal, investment pipe deal, that tells us that there's a lot of interest in this sector. Sorry, let me just.
Sorry.
do you want me to continue on some of the other questions? I think a comment.
Sure, CS. I think it's, let's have the opportunity for our clients to interact with you. So if you can take all of them that you can see there, it's fine.
Okay. Lockdown, I don't know what people mean by lockdown too. I mean, or rather what they understand by lockdown, but I think it's really, it's a strategy that governments around the world are using to minimize citizen movement in order to minimize opportunities for contact and transmission. I don't think anybody can put a wall around a country or around a town. So, but the issue is to really just restrict as much movement as possible. So it's really more of what we are going through and more homestays. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Raphael, maybe somebody else can.
All right, yeah, sure. Just take a break. Thanks for those very useful responses. I think I'll come back to Kwame because I think clearly the CS shares your view on lockdown. So I think you've indicated in that regard, at least from a government policy standpoint. My question to you, Kwame, in addition to what you can pick up there from the chart is. What do you think the policy toolkit is missing in terms of responses? What should we look out for? Is there more maybe untraditional policy responses that you can think of for this moment?
Okay, let me. I think that's a difficult question, so I'll handle it last. But let me just talk about two things that I've seen in the chart. The first one is. I think that, I mean, Betty's definition about lockdown, it's necessary to restrict movement to prevent community transmission. That's real. But I'm thinking that in Kenya, for instance, because one of the fantastic things that the ministry has done, notwithstanding the fact that it hasn't released all the data, is to show us where the hotspots are. And maybe it's the hotspots that we should have actually started by going early to actually prevent that movement. And of course, that would mean Nairobi as well. What that allows for resources to be concentrated in places where the highest rates of transmission are possible and where already the incidence of the disease is. So maybe that's a choice. But if we talk about a national lockdown, its costs in terms of the number of people we probably have to put in the streets to police movement would be too high. So it's possible for us to do it in that way. I mean, that's, I think, what happened in the countries in which there's been success. As everybody proclaims China's success in Wuhan, I think that's what worked. Whether that was, whether some data is missing or not is a different matter altogether. The second point that I said is, as the IEA will be releasing a small brief later this afternoon saying about, there are many options about what government can do. I think there are some things that it cannot do. So for instance, in our trade program, my colleagues who study trade, we tried to ask ourselves, what would import substitution look like? And we looked at the basic ventilators, you know, the ventilators that are a big trade commodity right now. And we found out that the most basic one actually has 80 different parts, about 83 or 84 different parts to simply put that unit together. And those things come from something like 22 countries. So the idea of import substitution as an ongoing trade policy is something we need to be very cautious about, because it would be too difficult to actually unwind all the global value chains that have occurred, which allows people to actually produce things efficiently. So while it is, I use the word seductive appropriately, while it is seductive as a policy right now to say, let's look at import substitution, I think it would be extremely dangerous to try, and it would be very, very costly and inefficient over the long term. So we have to be very, very careful as we talk about import substitution in what and what. The possibility to go into new products is possible, but I think that trying to actually unwind global value chains for a country such as Kenya would not. It would probably work in the US, and obviously opportunities that are, rather, the policy scope that a government like that has to clamp down and actually ask big industrial manufacturers to produce ventilators is possible. And the US as a whole, its reliance on trade is not so high. So some countries will be able to, but I think for Kenya, to talk about import substitution might be dangerous policy. Now, coming to what government has not done, or rather, what are some of the things that are missing? I think it's true. At the IEA, we believe that the only thing government would be able to do would actually to provide us social protection subsidy, as Betty has said, and to target it, I mean, to not spend too much time in targeting it, to actually give it to as many people as possible, especially in urban and rural areas. because we know what these vulnerabilities are. But they've indeed raised a fantastic document, which we actually have combed. And one of the things that most impressed me about it is he makes the estimate that for 150 billion, we'd be able to provide a lifeline for SMEs that would actually keep the bottom from falling off. Now, that's a brilliant solution for two reasons. One, we've spoken here about keeping relationships. So keeping people at work as we prepare is essential. But the second one is just to prevent the bottom from falling off by making sure that as soon as we are recovering, employers don't have to go back through rehiring people, keeping people trained and all that. And more importantly, for 150 billion shillings, which is very cheap, I think just slightly more than, close to 2% of our GDP, that would be an interesting way, and it will give us such a good multiplier that I think government ought to reconsider it. It can be tweaked one way or the other, but a lifeline for SMEs implemented through financial institutions and banks is very easy to design. And I think it's something that the government should give greater attention to. Thanks.
Thanks, Kwame. I think Betty, are you in a position to carry on?
Thank you very much. Washeke's comments are really, for me, the crux of the challenge that we are facing right now. In that the advice to all of us is to be very careful about what we're spending. So basically what that means is basically spend on essentials. And that's what people do in a crisis such as we are. So what that does is that it poses a challenge for producers of goods that are considered non-essential. And yet they are a core part of this business. In the context of restaurants, for instance, okay, fine, we're not going out, but people are obviously choosing to eat at home rather than to eat in a restaurant or even order. That I think is a challenge. So you actually see depression for people in that sort of business. So I think the challenge I think that we are facing is that this decreased movement really has impact on various sectors. So I think for those of you and for your clients who are in the space of discretionary demand, the challenge is how to reorganize themselves if they can and find alternative businesses if they can. And then the challenge for banks, and that I think speaks to some of the comments that, that Kwame just made, is that keeping businesses alive or supported during this period is a partnership between all of us, between government and the financial institution. So the question that comes again is that from the sort of breathing space you got with the cash ratio flexibilization, is it possible to target part of the resources within the bank to supporting this targeted support to SMEs in this vulnerable space? Because that's how that survival fund, business survival fund, is anticipated would work. And I think the conversation that I said, I'm sure we would continue to have with yourselves is really towards providing this survival line for small businesses. On the second question, and I've seen, we've seen others around participation and support to counties for preparation. I think the minister has been very eloquent in his presentation that the preparation is national. The support of isolation facilities and other things within counties is something that we this disease is not going to be localized. We might have some centers and places that are showing more positive cases, but if Kenyans are indisciplined and and go from one place to the other, then this can easily spread. So we must have readiness, and the intention is to have readiness in every part of the country. And I think from the reports that we have received and have been given by the Minister for Health, is that this readiness is being exhibited around the country. Another question that has come or has run through when I see what I can see on my screen is the expectations of constant feedback from government and updates from government. The Ministry of Industry, Trade and Enterprise Development set up a business emergency call center, call reception center about 3 weeks ago. So far, what we've dealt with a lot are operational issues on what on dealing with the unfolding situation, movement of goods, dealing with the police, cross-border freighting of cargo, interpretation of directives of government. So that center remains open, and we review the content in it every day. Government on its own has set up targeted committees, and I think that was announced, targeted work and structures for resolving the crisis. So we maintain the health, the health committee chaired by Mutai Kagwe, the Minister for Health. We maintain an economy and business working group that is, brings together the Minister for the CS for Finance and the National Treasury, the Central Bank Governor, the CS for Industry, the CS for Tourism, the CS for EAC and Labor. So that is another, a close working group on those matters. We have obviously a working group on security and organization, and especially in the context of administration of the necessary security measures to be able to ensure that we can support the Ministry for Health in really identifying and tracing our contacts and also dealing with support to vulnerable groups. And then there's a whole conversation around food and then food and the county coordination with the Minister for Agriculture and the Minister for Devolution and Water. So there are structures in place, and we are constantly feeding in to all these and a very clear nerve center for operations of government. Now, within this, it's important for the private sector to also be participating, sharing ideas, but also sharing what it is that they can do. We've seen a lot of interest in people supporting with delivery of instances of health commodities. But we'll go some more, and even as, because we, like I said, there's life during and after Corona, but even the private sector in supporting and delivery of agricultural goods and inputs, especially through these e-voucher systems. So it's important that we keep going, and with obviously with the nerve center of government directing and communicating what it is that's happening. So I just like to give that assurance that we're pretty well organized for this, and looking at delivery of the government services even within this this time. As I end, I think the issue around the business side is, I think for the different businesses that have made comments on the wall and want to continue to have a conversation with us, I think we remain open from our offices, and obviously through this media, to be able to interrogate some of the proposals that you're given, and together we can find solutions for ourselves, and especially for growing our business in Kenya. Kwame, import substitution is a very good idea. I think there are many things. Once we've done the analysis, there's a lot of things that Kenya has capacity to produce that it hasn't been producing. And we could utilize that both for ourselves, but also for the regional market. The analysis that's been done about the potential in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area indicates that clearly we have capacity to be able to displace some suppliers into Africa of the same products that we can make. So that's, I think it's something that we need to encourage our industrialists to take very seriously, because the market is opening both within Africa. The negotiations of the free trade agreement with the US will also be able to provide stability of markets for those who have been exporting to the US and can export into that very large economy. Thank you.
Thanks, yes, and I completely agree on the last point. Obviously, I guess what's being put forward is not necessarily economic nationalism in the type that we are replacing everything for its sake, but the kind of suggestions you give have implications for overall innovation and productivity as well for ourselves. So some essential stuff in terms of, from an import standpoint, obviously, I think there's merit in trying to just rethink our role supply dynamics. And I think to Kwame, the comparison, your critique around that is I think broadly accurate, especially if people push forward economic nationalism as an ideology itself. And so I think that nuance is often useful. Now, the CS also mentions stuff about actually, in the subtext is a challenge to financial institutions. And I think in the last point about David Lee's suggestion, I think something of a discount window type solution for the real economy side, similar to what we have on the banking side. I think we'll come back to that. But for my colleagues from the bank, starting with John Gashora and John Okulo, any sort of responses on from a financial institution response basis, like what do we see as opportunities for? I like the idea about a caucus for resuscitating manufacturing as a direct challenge from the CS. What are our thoughts on that?
Maybe John can speak first.
Yeah, I think if it comes to providing some kind of fund, I presume, to keep businesses afloat, the biggest challenge that needs to be surmounted is what is the end game of this? Huh? And when you look at some of the more wealthier companies that have come up with these solutions, there is one fundamental requirement, is that we have to ensure that we are supporting businesses, ensuring that there is liquidity running through the system, but also ensuring that we are supporting businesses that are gearing themselves up for future success. And in the changing environment, I think Washeke gave a very good example about her business. If we think of it right now, schools are physically closed, but education continues. And you may find that after this crisis, the cost of providing quality education may drop significantly because we can suddenly provide it remotely. You may not even need to bring in experts or highly paid teachers if you can simply get them to dial in and your students to dial into an online session. We would be holding this conference in one of the hotels, but we're now holding it online. Now, the challenge that we need to pose to ourselves is, how do the hotels recreate themselves? And possibly the next session that we have is a virtual session at one of the hotels. And so on and so forth. So I think as an industry, we certainly do have to come together and provide solutions, but those solutions must be geared towards ensuring that when we come out of this crisis, we're coming out as a much fitter and stronger country.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I think if I may, Rafa, if you allow me.
Yes, John, please go ahead.
Regards to a number of questions that have been asked, seen a number of questions directed to the bank. One is to first say that we shall take the challenge from the CS and ensure that post the crisis that we shall take a leading role in caucusing with industrialists to see how we march on today's local supply theme. A number of questions have been asked about what NCBA is doing. And I thought one is to say that, the first thing is to say that banks, by and large, hate non-performing loans. We don't want to see them. So it's in our interest to assist our customers to go through this period, as opposed to them becoming non-performing. I'm talking about those borrowing customers. We have a lot of non-borrowing customers, but for the borrowing customers, we wouldn't want them to get into the non-performing category. So it's important us to work together with customers to get through this period. Whereas this crisis has hit everybody and has hit every business, the experience is a bit individual. Therefore, you have to individually come to us through emails or whichever means of communication you have with us to work with us to ensure that we support you during this period. What kind of support are we offering? The support goes from restructuring loans, and restructures includes giving you extensions on your loans. I know on the announcement we said up to 12 months, but as I said, it's very individual. Some may need extension even beyond 12 months, and we shall consider that. Lowering your payments, I've seen a lot of questions about whether we can interest, whereas I don't promise that we can freeze interest because we are lending you other people's money. What we shall work with you is to lower your payments to a point where you can afford them. If you're able to demonstrate that your business has been affected in such a way that you need a moratorium, that means freezing payments for interest and even for principal during this period, we're open to give you moratoriums during this period, at least initially for up to 90 days. That's what we're looking at this point. And then we are asking employers to also remember to give your employees a letter they can take to their bank explaining what the business is going through so that the banks also can consider accommodating your employees. That's actually quite important, that your employees, the support you can also give them is to help them negotiate with their banks, their respective banks. I think there was a question about bank consolidations post-corona crisis. Well, I've always been of the view that we need bank consolidation. I'm sure you've all probably read me talking about the fact that we probably even need forced marriages for banks to get together. But that said, I think the corona crisis will obviously portend some challenges for a number of institutions. However, what I can assure you is that the central bank and the banking organization are working closely together to ensure that all the banks are supported. Recoveries in capitalist states are usually led by banks, so it's quite important that post-corona crisis, the banking system remains very strong. I think from what you have seen, the actions being taken by the central bank, working with the Kenya Bankers Association, is to ensure that post this crisis, we are ready to help you customers go through the recovery by supporting your business during that time. I think what is important today is that, as I said before, whereas plans are rendered useless very quickly, planning is very, very important. So for every business, even as we work towards survival, I think Washeke went through the 3 baskets of survival, even as we go through that, it's also to start thinking about the post-day one, what we think a business needs to look like, and making the right plan so that at that point you can come to the banks immediately and say, well, now that we have post this is what we're planning to do. How can you help us? That's what I would like everybody to do. Thanks, Rafa.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think your point on the preparedness of banks in times of crisis could not be more timely. As a matter of fact, I think when this history is written, you will see probably the fact that banks are now a little bit more well capitalized comparatively to 2008, and liquidity is also quite solvent. We're going to ride this tide a little bit better from a financial impairment standpoint. I think that point needs to be made. Now, there are a lot of questions on the FX outlook, foreign currency outlook, Kenya shilling. I think we made some projections, but we have on call a Group Director for Global Markets, Mr. Michael Wachira, who can probably very quickly respond to that, because we need to wrap up and probably let you get on with the rest of the day. So Michael, if you may, there are a lot of questions on FX. You can pick on any and just basically give a sense of how our clients can deal with that.
Okay, thank you very much, Raphael. I'll start by providing global context as to what's happened in the past few weeks. It's been very interesting because really for the last couple of years, volatility in the financial markets has been fairly low. Stock markets have been rising, but over the past few weeks, we've seen increased volatility. What did we see in the stock markets? For example, the Dow went below 20,000, as low as 18,000, now has risen to 21,413. We had the S&P index falling significantly to just above the 2,000 levels. But what we've seen in the past week or so is a recovery of sorts. The reason for that recovery is a coordinated action, but especially the action from the U.S. authorities in terms of planning for great stimulus into the U.S. economy. To put that into context, they're talking about a $2 trillion stimulus program. $2 trillion, annual GDP in the US is about 21 trillion. So that's about 10%. That's a huge amount of stimulus coming into the American economy, clearly demonstrating the fear that is in the markets right now. There's a question on oil. Oil has come down, if you look at the WTI index, 60%. Brent, just a little lower than that, 56%. Of course, there was a bit of a recovery yesterday after the comments by the US president. But if you look at oil futures today, they've actually come off a bit. The oil story will continue to be a little bit more complicated by the fact that there's an issue of storage. There's a huge amount of supply that's coming into the system. And one of the difficulties as the two protagonists, Saudi Arabia and Russia especially, by the time they actually come into an agreement, there's a huge amount of supply that could overwhelm potentially in the next few months the global storage. So that's something to watch. It's difficult to predict, but we expect more volatility coming in the oil sector. But what's relevant for us, especially dollar borrowers have been looking at LIBOR coming off 200 basis points in the past one and a half years, and asking why shouldn't we have the same levels of low borrowings in emerging markets? And the difference is the way emerging markets, and Kenya would include in the emerging markets, the way it's viewed by the principal providers of US dollars. Treasuries, 10-year US dollar treasuries, government borrowing, US government borrowing has come down from about 1.5%, 1.6%, came all the way down to 0.3%, went above 1%, and is now settled at 0.6, around about 0.6%. In other words, if the US government goes out there and takes money, 10 years, using the government bonds, they would attract an interest rate of 0.6%. But from a credit risk perspective, look at the Kenya sovereigns. You are aware that the Kenya government issued Eurobonds. Those Eurobonds about 2 months ago were trading, say for example, the 8-year Eurobond was trading at about 5.5%, between 5.5% and 6% yield on an 8-year bond. That went all the way up above 10% and has now come down to about 8.5%. So the spread between what's considered to be the risk-free US government treasuries and the Kenya government risk has actually widened. And that demonstrates the perception of credit risks by international investors. But in addition to it being the perception of credit risk, it's also a liquidity issue, because what's happened is a significant number of retail investors have over the past 10 years put their savings into funds, which in turn invest in a variety of asset classes. With all the volatility that you saw in the past few weeks, a lot of those funds experienced a withdrawal of liquidity by the principal investors. So a lot of the selling is not necessarily just credit risk, but a lot of it is driven by liquidity concerns by the end investor. But the silver lining is, while there was concerns in terms of the rates rising, the interest rates rising for emerging market risk, those interest rates are actually now coming down. We're seeing a settling. What we're seeing is a lot of the investors are getting more settled, And over the next few weeks, we should, or even months, depending on how the public health scenario plays out, where there's a possibility of seeing lower yields in some of these principal investments. Now, when it comes down to the markets, the domestic markets, we usually have seasonality in the way the Kenya shilling behaves in the market. Usually in Q2, you tend to get, demand tends to go up. And it tends to go up for a variety of reasons. You get the horticulture, the demand, the dividend investors, the portfolio investors, foreign investors tend to receive their dividends and transfer their dividends offshore. From a supply side, you do get traditionally lower horticultural exports during the Q2 period to Q3. So what that happens is you tend to find a reduction in terms of liquidity, dollar liquidity or foreign currency liquidity in the market. So usually the Kenya shilling is a lot more vulnerable, even ignoring what's happening right now. Typically what you get is a lot more vulnerability in the Kenya shilling. So, but of course this time it's different. You're getting the lower flows from an export perspective, but you're also getting lower imports. Just to put it into context, Kenya imports amount to about 17 billion US dollars. About 15% of that is oil, petroleum imports. Another 3% is the cooking oil type imports. So if you have a significant reduction, a 60% reduction in oil prices, your largest import bill will actually come down quite drastically. Okay, and then listening to what also for example, Washeko was saying, a lot of the discretionary spend is also being affected. So while you have a lower, lower inflows from foreign currency, and possibly could be lower even because of the diaspora flows, as was demonstrated in the presentation, there's also this other side that's supportive of the shilling. In other words, the import side is also going to be constrained as well significantly. So there's a possibility. I mean, there's a vulnerability in the shilling, but in terms of a dramatic breakout within the next few weeks, couple of weeks, is perhaps unlikely. But of course, we watch it on a day-to-day, as Raphael actually stated. The last thing to say is we also note the announcement in terms of the Cbk reserves. They fell 350 million by 350 million US dollars in the week ending March 26th. So that will be another key factor in terms of watching what happens in the FX market. Lastly, I'd also like to point out the importance of ensuring that our numbers on a macro basis are positive, because when you consider South Africa went through a debt downgrade. Moody's was the last major ratings agency to downgrade South African debt to junk status. That, of course, has complicated its ability to respond to the complexities of the coronavirus. So it's important that even as we respond to what's happening on the coronavirus, we remember that the ratings agencies are also watching the key factors, especially on the fiscal side and even on the monetary side.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's the point that I think was being captured as either credibility of government or, let's just say, fiscal preparedness. So I couldn't agree more. On the shilling, I think you may have seen in our model, that's why it's almost looking flat, even if you look at from where we look in Q2 all the way to Q4, we're factoring in those demand and supply side calibrations that are new, in spite of the general trend, which we all agree has to be southwards. Now, I think I want to bring it to a close. So I'll allow a round of closing remarks. I'll start with Kwame. So if you can go ahead, please, just your final remarks.
Sorry. Okay. I think the idea is that yes, there's a lot of there's going to, I mean, or rather, these demands from business quite some bit of patience, in the sense that some of the plans or decisions that you have to make will have to be played on as more information comes in, then you're able to make decisions about what's the right thing to do. But on the whole, I think we hear quite a lot about whether stimulus is coming. Everybody knows it will have to be very carefully crafted because we don't have a lot of fiscal space. But if there ever was a moment for some kind of on this one side support for SMEs, and on the other to consider the opportunity to actually try and jack up the economic activity, this would be it. So it's commendable. I think the kind of tax cuts that were announced by the president, we hope Parliament will pass them over time. And if that happens, obviously, that will allow some little slack that allows for businesses to I mean, not only to preserve margins, but actually to be able to preserve economic activity going forward. The final point is that I think the real certainty about these issues will come when we are suddenly aware about what phase in the cycle of the pandemic or of the epidemic we are in Kenya. It's not possible to assess it yet. And I think part of that is because we don't have sufficient tests to be able to allow us to have an accurate view about where we are. And obviously, so settling that fear and uncertainty is something government needs to do. I think I've seen announcements that we'll soon be able to conduct up to 1,000 tests per day. I think if that can be done, because as soon as we do as many tests as we are, we'll be able to actually not only tell where the hotspots are, but also to tell where the trajectory is. So understanding that trajectory so that we can talk meaningfully about flattening the curve is important. And that obviously is just the role of government in being able to expand the testing. Thanks.
Washeke, is your first or your final thoughts?
Yes, I'll even do one in response to a question somebody has actually put on Facebook. But I'll just start with, I think my final thoughts are 3. I think everybody now has to ask themselves, what's the plan, which has been said by a number of the speakers already. And I would advise you start thinking through a 3 to 6 months plan. So when it comes to individuals, it's even things, we call it an emergency fund. Can you survive on your basic expenses for 3 to 6 months? Whether that's through the resources you already have, or whether that's through any income that's going to come in or you're going to strive to get, that's what immediately you should actually put in place. For the businesses, the plan, so it's about saying, what's my plan for the next 3 months? For businesses, the plan cannot be, I hope we get out of this and just go back as soon as possible, because I think a lot of businesses, especially SMEs, may be sitting right now without a plan. So that can't be the plan. So I think for businesses, I think they should think through the plan of first understanding who is the customer. Somebody has asked me, how do I identify opportunities? And the first thing is starting to understand what are going to be the behavior preferences, what are going to be the preferences of the customer going forward, and talk to them. Start to understand what is the value you are now giving that customer, just like us and a lot of people in service industries are now realizing when it's online, the value is different and has to be packaged different. And then what's the financial logic? So that even if you are going to your bank for assistance, it can't be on the same plan, and any cash reserves or funds that you're getting are now being deployed to the new plan. I just want to in anything, I've always believed that whenever we go through things like this, there's always a lesson at the end of the day. And I think for individuals, a lot of them are now finding things that they should have done before, like saving and investing. This is what they should have done before. So take the lesson, and so that as we do go get out of it, you don't come back with the bad habits of spending, taking debt for the wrong reasons and things like that. For businesses, they are now seeing that lack of structures. So a lot of businesses have been caught unaware because they don't have lack of structure. Even things like working from home, a lot of businesses have not been able to do it because they have never conceptualized, if I am not there, if the CEO or the founder of the business is not there, they don't know how it runs. And that just calls to lack of structure. So I think as businesses, we must also take this opportunity to look at, why are we in the mess we are? Apart from COVID and the financial issues, do I have lack of business? Do I have lack of structure? Or my supplier relationships not right? Or my customer relationships not right? And also take this time period to actually fix that, so that we don't go into the next season, whatever the next season will bring, with the same habits of behavior. So let's also use this, as much as we have to survive, let's all use this for transformation as well.
Thank you very much, Osheke, for those thoughtful comments. I think I'll now ask the CS to just sort of also just close for us in terms of final thoughts. CS Beatty.
Thank you very much. I think I've said a lot. I think we are all watching to see how Corona, pans out. But I guess the big thing for everybody is to prepare for life during and after Corona. I think I'd just like to repeat that for your customers who want some interventions and conversations with government, our offices remain open. We are contactable both by phone, by email, by Zoom. I guess these are the new modes of communicating. And we look forward to great partnership with yourselves in ensuring that we can all chart this course as a country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, CS, for spending your morning with us. I think for everybody who joined virtually, we are very grateful that you're able to interact with us. Useful questions, some of which require further research. As Kwame has mentioned, obviously, it's early days of this crisis in terms of at least the economic impacts of it. So we continue to be attentive to developments globally and our own local context, and we'll be revising our models from time to time to make sure that to the extent possible we are able to at least guide us in how to think about these moments, hence navigating what we can all see is an unprecedented crisis that's set upon us. Now I'll hand over back to Rosalind.
Okay, so thank you very much, Raphael, and a big thank you to all the panelists for helping us navigate the conversation around financial survival in the time of Corona. At this point, we're well run over time. So I will just ask my colleague, Group Director John Okulo, to give his final remarks and a vote of thanks, and we shall call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. So from what we've heard today, what has really changed? This virus has changed the manner in which we interact as human beings. And there is an initial shock due to the sudden change. But depending on the length and depth of this crisis, some of the changes may become normal and therefore permanent. The industries that are hardest hit are those that rely on physical interaction with other members of society, i.e. non-family members. That's where the whole social distancing comes in. And it impacts that physical interaction at work, in social settings, shopping malls, as well as those businesses that rely on the physical movement of people and goods. These are unfortunately the industries that the vast majority of us depend on, hence the sudden high rates of unemployment, loss of income, and high levels of concern about the future. But I believe that this morning, what we've heard is that there is certainly a great deal of hope. There's a lot of action that has been taken to ensure that we get through this crisis. I'm therefore honored to give the vote of thanks. And I thank the Honorable CS, Betty Maina, for attending this forum, giving us a very close view of the activities that government is taking, and certainly ensuring that all the people on this call have a level of confidence that we're certainly doing whatever is required to deal with the problem. We also thank you for confirming that your doors are open to listen to any concerns or issues that our customers may have. And we will be compiling some of the feedback and forwarding it to your office. I'd like to thank our guests, our panelists, Kwame Owino and Washeke Ndwati, for your very insightful views. And I also thank our Group Managing Director, Mr. John Gashora, Raphael Agung, our Chief Economist and Director in Treasury, for leading us in this session. I thank my colleague, Michael Washira, for giving us a very clear view on how the global markets operate. And I think the concerns that a lot of people have on the FX markets and the exchange rate is primarily driven by views and sentiments. But I think, Michael, you've broken it down very clearly on what will actually lead to the movement. I thank the economics team, Faith Atiti and Stephanie Kimani, for putting together all the data that has been used for this session. And of course, Rosalind Gishuru and her marketing team for arranging this conference, and all the NCBA staff members that are here with us. Our customers, I would like to assure you that we are here for you. We will listen to your requests. We'll work with you through this crisis, and we'll do our very best to ensure that as we come out of it, we come out much stronger than when we entered into it. Thank you very much for participating today. Over to you, Rosalind.
Okay, so that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for dialing in. There will be more to come. This is just the beginning of this conversation. So looking forward to hosting you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosa. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.